Hello and welcome to another ET Newsroom segment. And this time I'm with Peter Vincent of the Dowsing Detective series. I went and joined Peter on Thursday, the 9th of February 2023, where he showed me some of his research that he'd been working on in terms of missing persons. And in this particular case, it was to do with Nicola Bulley. Now, Nicola went missing January the 27th, 2023, whilst walking on a towpath past the River Wyre near where she lives in St Michael's on Wyre, UK. That is Lancashire, and that is Wyre, W-Y-R-E. Now, Nicola was walking her dog Willow, and she had not long before just dropped off her two children at school, 6 and 8. Nothing indicated that Nicola was in distress, planning to leave her family or otherwise. Now, the police and others have extensively searched the river, which is tidal and goes out to Morecambe Bay. And with the river being dragged to such a degree that they have not found anything, they're now concentrating, feeling that she must have fallen in the river because the river's tidal and that she had been swept out to sea. So they are looking there. Now, Peter has a rather different view, and who knows, we're rather hoping it might open up to another area of investigation. In any event, this is important and we hope you find it helpful. This is a serious piece and we do wish all the best for the family and present this with the utmost awareness of the sensitivity of the case. I'm here with Peter Vincent today, and we are testing some codes he's created for Nicola Bulley, who went missing on January the 27th, 2023, and has not been seen since. Peter created a unique code for her, and we're going to test it. That also depicts Nicola dead. If Nicola was alive, as she was indicating earlier in the days, the last two colours, the black and the yellow there, would not be there. So the black and the yellow denote deceased state. We have a couple of images of buildings and we'll tell you about those in a minute, but we're going to watch Peter with the code, which has a magnetic imprint of her.
If you hold one of these codes set for the target and you go on Google Earth and you extract maps, for instance, or photographs, space photographs of any sort, they hold all magnetic information about what's contained within those photographs. So if there's some material within the frame of that map that responds to this, it will cause a drag on these rods, and therefore you're identifying that there is matter connected to that person within that building or in that field or in that wider area or that county even. We can go over the world's maps basically and look for this. It's called remote viewing. It's remote because I'm not divining on site, I'm remote viewing over the maps. But I'm using dividing rods just to give you an example of how the drag happens.
The drag causing the rods to cross.
Because basically what's happening is the map is expanding up like an ice cream cone. Gets wider and wider and wider the higher you get. That's why dividing by remote viewing is more effective, because you have a wider area to pick the signal up until you fine tune it down to within about 12 square feet.
And we do know that this system is also used by military. I don't know if the police use it.
Well, the special branch used to use it, as far as I was informed, because somebody who worked for the special branch checked some of my work in our town and basically said I'd missed certain things, so I went back and picked those certain things up, but I wasn't actually looking for those other things, But the thing is that I've also been tested on this, on substances, and when I made contact with the Biolocation team, Geoff Crockford, found this very interesting because certain things they couldn't hold in their research, and they found that by creating the colours for these substances, they were able to hold the colours and they got the results without actually holding the materials themselves. Cesium, strontium, plutonium. Yeah. We discovered this in 2003, an accidental discovery. And then we were tested at the London Museum in 2004, and they tested us on 3 subject matters. We had to find on a map of Cornwall where gold had been discovered in Cornwall. we had to go over a map of Hampshire and area for oil and gas, Dorset and oil and gas. But then she said, I live near a former Cold War missile silo in South London that's been deactivated, just like a bomb site area. Can you tell us where it is on the maps, please? So we went over and we used uranium code, which is a multiple colour code like the one I've just shown you, and orange 4 picks up radiation. We were all correct, 100%, 3 of us. This is one of the reasons why you remote view away from other people, because you don't want your mind to interfere with their mind and pick up information and swap it, you see?
Okay.
And there's no response whatsoever. There's no drag at all on that whatsoever. There's nothing in that building. So I'm now going to this building here. And yeah, I mean, there's a drag on the rods, they're crossing. So I'm picking up something here, and when I come off the map, it comes on. Now, what we've just tested are 2 hospitals. They're both in Lancashire. That one, there's nothing responding in it, and that one, there is something responding in it.
We say this is Hospital A, just that it's on the
Hospital
left.
A, yeah.
Hospital A, there is response.
Yeah, and Hospital B, there is no response.
And Hospital B,
There's
zero
no
response.
Now, Mr. Cooper also did this test from home, because I sent him emails of the photographs and he found exactly the same. 2 remote viewers that's found it. Normally 3 remote viewers means it's passed on and it would be acted upon in some form or other. It's a very, very delicate situation. It gives people a certain point to start off from of investigation. Now I'll show you something else too. We can see the photograph of the person is where you get the code from in the first place.
That's Nicola Bulley.
Yeah, basically we're going to come over here, and it's an extremely strong signal. Very, very strong, because this signal came from her photograph. That's the point. It's her photograph. We've extracted her signal from her photograph. This wouldn't go over somebody else's photograph. This might seem very strange. There are colours at the top, pink, white and silver for female, and it would be male would be pink and white. If you're deceased, then you add black and yellow. So immediately you can cut the population in half because there's male and females. And then you can further reduce the population because not everybody's dead. So there's a cremation code as well, which then even further reduces things down. So every one of us has got our own DNA. And what is interesting, this code, if anybody else has anything to do with this code, they will show up as well.
So how could that possibly happen?
Well,
that there could be 2 people with the same code?
Because basically if you donate some tissue, for instance, to somebody else,
like blood.
Yeah, like blood or a kidney, then that kidney will have the donor's code in it, and the receiver has their own code. So they go around with both codes. Then you have to have anti-rejection drugs in order to fox the brain from rejecting the code that doesn't belong to the person.
So even if people have this anti-rejection, you'll still pick it up?
No, the drug doesn't affect that at all.
Right.
But in actual fact, actually code these drugs as well. This can be coded, this has been done before.
Now, this code that we've got here that you've shown us.
If this was cremated, you would remove the white and add grey too, because the white actually depicts the spirit of the person. That's why it's in both male and female. And if you remove the white, you've taken the spirit away and you create it into ash.
So just to reiterate, if this was a code showing that there was a cremation of this same person, the white would be gone and there'd be
grey too added.
Grey, so
because all these colours have specific value. So pink is 13, white 7, silver 12, grey 2, red 9, green 6, orange 4, yellow 5, black 10. This goes right the way back to the ancient temples. Every single temple around the world, the high priests knew all these colours and they used it by divine methods. Basically there were 16 colours, and then they had 16 symbols. And this is why all alphabets are different. Basically, the mind is tuned to these very same colours.
Magnetically.
Because that's what we've been created to operate on. And then the mind works in colours, like a computer of colour, and then it relates to the brain for computing the numbers, the smells, the sounds, the alphabets, and the mathematics. I just say the mind never goes to sleep at all. And minds exchange information with other minds.
Now back to Nicola Bulley. What is your conclusion?
As I understand it, the river has been very thoroughly swept between 3 and 5 miles. Nothing has been found so far.
And for people who don't know, that is the main area of inquiry, that the River Wyre.
They're now looking at the sea. Well, even on the sea, there would be a wash up somewhere. And I'm sure that Coast Guards and people will be looking at this. Now, we've operated on various missing people in the past, and the easiest part to do is to establish their condition, because their photograph will always respond as alive if they are alive, but if they're deceased it will not respond as alive and go with black and yellow as deceased. So you've got two basic codes for that, and we use those in archaeology. I mean, I've been asked to look at a site in Colchester. I was just given this site. It was a very large site. And could I go over it, please? Because the archaeologist is going to work on there. So basically, I go over with the male and female code, and I found all these burials responding. And then I had codes for gold, leather, and silver. And I realised it was probably a Bronze Age burial area. So I marked this all out on the maps, scanned them over like the maps I've just shown you. And then about 10 minutes later, I had an email come in with photographs attached. Said, well done, 2 of your hits have hit already exposed graves. The archaeologists have already started on the front half and found skeletons in there. That was one example. The next example was in our own town. Archaeology group were going to do some work in a field, and they asked me to go over it. I found burials, I found post holes, I found sites of tunnels and things like that. So I reported all on the map, give them all the codes, and then they sent me a report. Well, here's arrows on the map where we found what you found, and they found human remains. Another test was in Poplar in London. I don't go to our dowsing groups. As a remote viewer, I work from an office on very specialist, limited subjects, more serious subjects than just general detritus, basically. My great friend Alan Hayday, who I learnt about this in the very beginning, said, I'm going to join the archaeology group in Poplar, London on Saturday. The dowsing group from North London's going there. Would I like to come? And I said, no, what I'll do is I'll do it from here. And then I will seal it in an envelope for you to open at the end of your event. So I got an AA book, blew up the maps of the area, and went over it, and I found plague pits, I found a wood henge, I found cremation pots, and I found loads of graves in lines, and I was able to ascertain some were in lead coffins, others in wood coffins, and others had no coffins at all. So I laid this all on the map, sealed it tongue-in-cheek. I actually have maps of Mars, and I went over Mars, where human burials are showing on there, which is another subject completely. I sealed that in there as well, didn't say anything about it, let them have it, and then to my absolute pleasure, when they opened it up, I'd found the plague pits that are actually recorded on maps, which I've never been to Poplar, and I'd found the actual archaeological site in the middle, but it was also the graveyard of the East India Church that I picked up in the direct line. Nigel said, look, I'm going to send you a map of the field area behind my bungalow in Chiswell Green. He said, so he sent this over, and I printed it off, and I went over it, and I found a whole line of burials, male and female. I found a spring water run on purple 1, and I found underground caves and tunnels near the motorway on green 6, which also picks up dirty salt water. And I laid this all out on the map, and then 10 minutes later he rang up and said, how on earth did you do that? He said, this is our testing site. You found the Roman row of graves all the way down there. There's the Bronze Age tunnels and things near the motorway, and the spring water run down. I said, well, that's how it works, you know. It's just the maps capture the information, and I have codes that then extracts that information. I'm now going to go over this code that was extracted from the photograph itself, and it's an extremely strong report, you know. Sad as it is. There we are. Over there, right?
So we've got a direct link right over Nicola Bulley's code and photograph.
Yeah. It won't be for anybody else, it'll just be for her. I'm a trustee of the British Society of Dowsers, which is based in Malvern. Opened up an internal email site where you can attach any findings you might have made independently, and then they'll be collated.
It's confidential.
Confidential. So basically what I'm doing is I'm doing this myself and passing my hits on, because when I get at least 2 or 3 people come up with the same response, then I feel that it should be passed on, as indeed we've done with other missing people, you know. Some time ago I was contacted by an undertaker. He rang me up and he said, look, a chap's gone missing in our village. He was He was unwell and depressed, but he's just vanished, and the police have been knocking on houses and things. So I said, have you got a picture of him? No, unfortunately, but I can tell you where he lived, and if you could scout the area, please, because we're very worried about him. So I got the map of, I think it was Wadhurst at the time, several years ago. I went over the maps and I found a response in the woods off the lane coming at the end of where these row of houses were. So I reported it. It might not have happened. The thing was, he'd gone away for the weekend, and I then went away. And then when I come back, I asked him about what the result was, and he said, well, in the following morning, he said, I went in the woods there and he was hanging. His body was found hanging from a tree. And I said, well, that was very sad, because if it operated before dusk, they might have rescued him. You know, I've had this in other things. You can use these codes for absolutely anything. We've coded ghosts, male, female, child ghost. Marco Roy from France asked me to look at an address in California to report on what I could find. I went over this address, again, extracted the map on Google Earth, and I had female ghost response. And when I hit the map, the energy ran out, which means that whatever you were recording, the response, no longer responded unless you followed it into the road. And every time I did this, it went back and then it went out of the road again. So I then found that the son and the mother and father had a bedroom in the front of the bungalow, the son had one at the back, and we found that the mother and son had been abducted. This was his main interest, because he was very much to do with abductions, not related to the sort of matter we're talking about. And he said, it's absolutely amazing, he said, because you don't know this person, you've never known this address before. He said, they've actually written a book about the female ghosts they live with in the house. And so it goes on, you see. And this is why we feel we have the confidence of coming to this conclusion. But as I said in an email to Authority today, I said, look, you can never be 100% accurate. What we need to understand is each one of us has an own identity called DNA. And that, in actual fact, is part of the magnetic resonance of us. And then you've got what you call condition codes. So each one of us can be identified differently. And I like to help the best way that one can on these sad situations. Now, I want to show you what we did to start off with that leads us to the conclusion that we have.
And Peter, can you just explain exactly what we're looking at here?
These are codes we use for archaeology and going over maps as well, just for straight burials, not identified to any particular person. So this is female, pink, white, silver, black and yellow, and male, pink, white, black and yellow. Silver goes only for female. The thing is that we go over the maps and then we can pick up the burial grounds. So I just want to explain that you can also use these on site. So we used to go to Kefalonia a lot for holidays. I'd like to do some work on connected to Bittlestone's search for Odysseus's palace. I found somebody called Yanis, who was a media man on the island, and he said, well, come over to Luxury and we'll do some testing there with your system, and maybe you can help us identify where the palace is, which they're searching for. So I got on the old ferry, went over to Luxury, and there was a guy with Yanis and also the policeman. I was introduced to the policeman, he was one of the police for Luxury, and explained what we're going to do. So Bobby, Yanis and I got in a car and we drove down a road. I then used a code for Odysseus, and the rod turned towards a hillside and they logged it. Now we want you to do something else, please. So they drove up the hill to the top above Luxury, and they stopped the car in the middle of the road. And he said, what can you tell us about this area there? And I used one of these codes, and I used my rods on the road, and they crossed. I said, well, as I walked about, I said, Yanis, you've got a burial ground under this road. He said, that's right. The farmers ploughing the fields each side have found human remains. So the road was cut through. So, yes, you found a burial site with these codes.
Are we talking about an ancient burial?
Yes, Bronze Age and Phoenician, that sort of thing. So then went to another thing where they stopped on the road, overlooking Luxury. He said, what can you find here? So I got out the car, went over, and I said, well, Yanis, I can't find any burials in the road here at all. He said, no, we're going to take you up there now and see what you can find up there. So we went out off the car, up this track to a mound and went into a cave. They said, this is a Phoenician tomb. What can you find in here? So I went round and said, well, it's obviously been searched by archaeologists. I said, but there's a pile of earth over here. So I went over to the pile of earth and I said, Yanis, you've got a burial under the pile of earth. I said, there was nowhere else for them to put it, so it's still there. He said, that's right. So he said, can you have a wander around and see what you can find? So I went out of the tomb and walked around, and I found basically burial after burial up there and reported them. And he said, well, it's strongly suspected there are more tombs here, so we'll report your findings at more Phoenician tombs there. And I said, yes, and not only that, but I'm picking up bronze and leather and possibly gold artifacts in there, you know. So he said, now we're going to take you to another location. And this is what I'm talking about, this missing lady. This is proving that this system works. And so we went to this house. It was dilapidated. Something happened here. There was an Englishman, and he was befriended by a foreign lady who turned up to speak English. But what happened was the Englishman disappeared, thought dead. And the reason why, that when they found the house was empty, they went in and found blood in the bath. So he said, can you have a look round, see what you can find? I went round with my rods, and I have a human blood code. Red, white and purple, 971. Human blood, picks it up. Basically, I went round and I had a look at the patio and I got a response where there was a washing line thing coming out. And I said, Yanis, I'm picking up blood under this patio here. He said, can you work out how many years ago? So I went one with the rods, holding the blood code. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and the rods crossed. I said, Yanis, about 7 years ago. He said, that's right, that's when it happened. And we've never been able to find the body or anything, and the woman disappeared. I got back to the hotel, and I'd been to the site, and then got some big A4 sheets of paper, joined them up. I always go on holiday with paper and envelopes, and I've got a great big packet of codes and everything, you know, with everything in it. And I laid the map out on the thing, and I went over it, and there was a wall next to the patio, and there was an olive grove next to it, and I went over there, and I picked up burials in the olive grove. So I reported it. So, you know, people can try and refuse that this system works, but it does work. That's the trouble, provided you've got the ability to do it. And when I provide these codes to other people, they can use them too. People don't like it or don't want to know about it because it undermines their forensic abilities, which they charge huge sums of money for.
Except this is also forensic.
Yeah. Now, yes, it's forensic insofar it's geared to colours, to magnetic sensory
and it's
values.
repeatable.
And it's repeatable, yes. If we look at that famous case of the bomb detectors, where a guy was sent down in the Old Bailey for selling bomb detectors that were supposed to be fraudulent, Geoff Crockford was called as a witness for the defence with a military man, a Royal Engineer. He trained up thoroughly to give a thorough demonstration in the Old Bailey that this worked. The thing is, he was never called to do it, but the guy was sent down, as I understand it, for enormously fraudulent price for the electronics that was in this thing, because they were working, but they didn't need any of the electronics. That's the point. So the military out there in Iraq didn't use them, and all the bombing started up again. In actual fact, the mine's doing the work, as we've shown this morning. Okay.
Thank you, Peter Vincent, our
right,
dowsing detective.
Yeah.
Okay, over and out on...